Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is part of the live expert sessions of 2026 for the mushroom course. And tonight I have on with me Jessica Snider. Where are you joining us from tonight, Jessica?
I'm on Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
Nice. And this is kind of fun. Some of you may have caught, I actually did a free public webinar with Jessica a few weeks ago, the intro to growing mushroom session that a lot of you have probably watched one version of it or another. That's how a lot of people end up inside of this course. And we do like just kind of a real intro level to, the different growing indoors, outdoors, foraging, things of that nature. Tonight, for all you folks, though, this is going to be the deep dive where we can kind of really get into the nitty gritty and get into the weeds, answer your questions and the specifics. And it's perfect timing because it is April right now, and it's a great time to be getting going with all your outdoor growing projects. So I'm really excited to dive in. We'll probably be, maybe an hour, a little over an hour tonight is about our plan. I'm going to start off with just like kind of a short conversation with Jessica, introduce you a little bit to her background and some of the fascinating work that she does. And then Jessica's kind of going to do a little bit of a presentation on some different growing techniques and some key pointers there. And then we'll basically spend some time answering your questions. And that's where we can get into the specifics. Like if you're struggling with something specific or if you don't know how to get set up in your unique situation, then we're happy to troubleshoot that with you live. You can put those in the chat or you can just unmute yourself. So yeah, that's kind of the game plan for tonight. So maybe I'll just start off by introducing Jessica here. It's kind of fun that I'm doing this with Jessica because I've probably been growing. My very first source of mushroom spawn was another company. It's a guy, he's actually retired now, not doing it anymore in Ontario. And I think basically the second person I found was Grow Mushroom Canada. And I think that was like over a decade ago, probably, that I first started buying stuff off of you folks. And I've always been super happy with Grow Mushrooms Canada. A couple of things I really love about them is they've got a very wide, especially for Canadian sources. There's quite a few stores down in the US that have a very wide range of materials and spawn and like all the different like grow bags and the tools and stuff. In Canada, that's actually really hard to find. So Jessica's company, Grow Mushrooms Canada, really is kind of one of the places that has like that big breadth of both mushroom spawn to start your projects with, but then also all of your materials for growing indoors and out. I buy my mushroom grow bags from Jessica. I've bought sawdust from her, like the compressed wood chip or compressed sawdust pellets for growing off her. I bought all my mushroom tools, like my inoculation tools from her. So yeah, I've been quite happy with that relationship. And as I think some of you folks know, anyone inside of the mushroom course that's in Canada, if you enter the coupon code ChrisOutdoors10, you get 10% off your order at Grow Mushrooms Canada. I think there's a couple exclusions to that. So anyways, all of that to say is I've been really happy with my experience from buying off Jessica over the years and her company and small family run business. I always love supporting the small businesses as well. So it's a pleasure to have her on here tonight. Before you dive into your presentation, maybe just give us a little bit of a background of like, how did you end up running a mushroom growing business in the first place? I think that'd be an
Yeah,
interesting question.
I started off with a love for wild foods, and the plants led me to the mushrooms. So I started harvesting wild. Like the dandelions symbol to me is it's time for the morels to start popping here where I am, and so that's my passion, has been foraging for wild mushrooms, and learning what ones I can eat and what ones I should avoid. And then I got wind that I could grow them. And that was about 15 years ago. And I've been pretty excited about growing them because then I'm no longer at the whims of nature. I can grow a diversity of things that I might not find out in the wild here, and I can grow them year round and in huge abundance.
And did you start right from scratch? Like, did you take courses when you were getting going? Like, what's your kind of education, or were you just kind of a DIY person? Like, I'm a full
Yeah,
DIY person.
a lot of learning on my own and learning by experimenting and doing. Because to be honest, my first adventure was growing shiitake on logs to sell at farmers markets, and I couldn't find any information in Canada specifically on how to do that. A lot of information was in the eastern United States, and so didn't know, will it grow on my local tree types here? And I would read that it takes six months and then you'll have fruit. Well, that's not what happened for me. I'm down there staring at my logs. It took like a year and a half before the first time that shiitake popped on them. So yeah, I feel a lot like I was learning as I went. And I feel like there's a lot that everyone can contribute to that journey. Everyone's climate and local resources are different. And they've tried different tricks. So there's like how to grow, and then there's keep experimenting and share that knowledge. And that's how the whole community has grown.
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things I've loved about just getting to know you a little bit better over the years is I love just kind of how innovative you are, always trying new experiments. I mean, that's very much how I learned, is I'd get an idea in my head, and it's kind of fun, as you start to understand kind of like the needs of mycelium at different stages, and you start to understand the unique properties, like, it's actually kind of fun. I had 2 bags of unlabeled mycelium in my fridge the other day that I got off a friend of mine, Shane. Um, and I got them in the mail, and then I just kind of stuck them in the fridge and almost forgot about them. And then I was like, oh, geez, I got to do something with these. And then I pulled them out. And I'm like, oh, man, which is which? And it was kind of cool. Like, I sat there and looked at them for a couple of minutes, and I was like, oh, I've got a pretty good guess just by looking at the mycelium. And it's just this kind
Yeah,
of like white fluff. But I'm like, no, I know which one the lion's mane and which one's the oyster are just by looking at it.
exactly.
So as you
You,
start
you
to
learn
build your
the different
relationship,
you learn the different properties of the mycelium and what it looks like in its different growth patterns, and yeah, how it looks. Yeah.
yeah, and as you build that relationship, you start coming up with ideas. Well, could I do this with it? What about that? And you start just kind of experimenting and you trying things. And, so I always encourage people, I'm always like, oh, that's actually sounds like it could work. Why don't you go for it? Let me know how it goes. So, but anyways, for people that don't want to just let me know how it goes, why don't we give them some very, very tangible tips that actually really help speed things up? So why don't we, start walking through some of the most common techniques that we can use this time of year.
Absolutely. So if you've never grown mushrooms before, the best way to get started is just straight up with a mist and grow kit, because your likelihood of success is very high, and you don't need much by way of any equipment. There's some species of mushrooms that are really easy to grow, like varieties of oyster mushrooms, and lion's mane is pretty easy to grow. So those would be the starting places, but then there's a huge diversity of them. So what we've got here is, for instance, this is a bag that's full of sawdust with some Canadian wheat bran. And then the white is the fungal mycelium that's growing on the sawdust. And that's the body of the mushroom. And then I have cut a slit in this bag. So it's a lion's mane. And so with lion's mane, I like to cut slits. So just a cut across the top. I cut it across the top because lion's mane hang down like a pom-pom. And then you can see, how's that showing? Am I big on the screen, Chris, or am I little?
No, I got you big right now. So
Okay.
yeah, and I can see okay.
Yeah, so you can see it's just pushing its way out. It's just amazing how mushrooms can do that. So I've got a slit cut on both sides. It's kind of like ears, and it's forming the lion's mane. And this one has been growing for, actually just been sitting on my porch. This has gone through a lot. This mushroom, it's had some freezing temperatures and different, we've got thankfully a lot of rain on Vancouver Island, but it's starting to dry out. So we're getting some gold areas where the sun and the dry wind is. But yeah, lion's mane, I mean, it's been very easy to grow. So you cut the bag, and then you mist it with a spray bottle with some water. Cover it with a plastic tent with some holes in it, and that's really all you need to get started.
Jessica, you don't have a humidity tent there to just show us an example by hand,
I forgot to grab one,
okay.
But it's literally just a plastic bag with holes in it, and you just drape it over. I mean, there's lots of ways you can do that. Like I will take a plastic shelf and I'll put my kits on the shelf, and then I'll drape a big sheet of plastic over top of it and leave it open at the sides because it needs some air exchange too. And then I'll take a hose and water the inside, like water the plastic and stuff, so it just creates a very humid environment, because that's the key to getting your mushrooms to fruit. So this one is a white oyster, and instead of a slit, I cut an X in the bag, and that creates these flaps. And as it's growing, it'll push its way out of those flaps, and this is forming a cluster. I've got one on the other side as well. It's a bit bigger. And yeah, if you don't, hand spraying is like the easy, you don't need anything but a little spray bottle and some plastic tent. But for if you're gonna do a whole bunch, then you might as well get like a little room humidifier. And you just plug it into the wall, put some water in, and it's constantly blowing up some mist into your tent. And all that has to be as simple as just a shelf with plastic draped over it. I mean, you can go bigger and better, but as a starting place, the oyster mushrooms growing right from a kit is a really good place to go. And we got just amazing varieties. Like we can grow pink oysters. I'm really excited to have some king oysters popping out in there. I'm really excited. They get massive and they've got a really firm texture. So there's a lot of variety in terms of the ease of growing something, the texture, the color, the aroma, and the nutritional profile. So yeah, I've got all sorts of like show and tell items here.
So I'm curious, you said that lion's mane are fairly easy. You're talking about from just like a grow kit that's kind of ready to go? Because I
Yes.
know, like, expanding inside of the mushroom course, I teach people how to take the grow bags of the oysters, but then expand that
Yeah.
into, say, straw, for example. And
Yes.
I'd say that it's relatively easy to do that if you kind of know a couple of tricks. Lion's mane, would you say it's a little bit harder, or would you say it's fairly easy to expand as
For
well?
expanding, so yeah, expanding is like you get this kit and you can cut it open and get a number of big clusters of mushrooms coming out. But eventually it'll use up the resources within this bag of sawdust. But instead of doing that, you could take this bag of sawdust. It has an infinite amount of potential for growing mushrooms. And oyster, as you mentioned, are the easiest to do that with because they grow so quickly and aggressively on all sorts of substrates like straw, wood chips. People also grow them on coffee grounds. And so you just crumble up the spawn in here and mix it in with your pasteurized straw or sawdust and wood chips, and you'll get huge amounts. So you can like get 10 times as much mushrooms or 20 times as much mushrooms out of this bag by expanding it. But yeah, the lion's mane, they don't grow on straw. They're more particular about the what they will grow on. And so, but you can do it in sawdust or wood chips, hardwood chips.
And
I do have some clips of my former lab manager growing in buckets lion's mane.
And you guys do sell like the compressed wood chips too now, don't you? Or not wood chips, sorry, the compressed sawdust that you re-moisturize. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? So how that, so
Yeah,
somebody, if somebody did want to try and buy, so just to back up for a folks second, if you're brand new, it makes a lot of sense to buy a kit and grow it out. It could also be an interesting way to decide what type of mushroom do you want to grow if you don't know the different species, is you buy a couple different ones, grow them out in the kit, get to taste them all, get a feel for them, build a relationship with them. But then once you decide, okay, no, I really want to do this, and this is the species I want to grow, then we're kind of talking about that next step where you're basically using that initial kit almost like the seed. Now, it's not a seed, it's spawn, but it's kind of the analogy. It's like taking garden seeds, and we're going to now take that bag of spawn and we're going to plant it into multiple other little projects. So if somebody wanted to do that with lion's mane, let's say, they could actually buy the compressed wood fiber from you, right? Or the compressed sawdust from you. And
yeah.
then what else, what would the next couple of steps look like for that?
To be honest, I would tell you to go to your local Canadian Tire and get the hardwood pellets because
okay.
they're sold as a, we do sell them, but it's, a lot to the cost of shipping and stuff, right? It's more economical for you to go to your local Canadian Tire if you're in Canada. It's just simply sawdust that's been compressed, and they sell them as fuel pellets, but they have no, there's no chemicals made in the production. It's strictly compressed sawdust. You might want to check that out with the brands because I just know the brand that we use. We've checked and verified that. But yeah, it's just a little pellet. And when you add water, it goes, ooh, it expands hugely. So it's a great way to get some hardwood sawdust. They also sometimes are selling conifer sawdust, which I've heard people use successfully to grow on as well. In those compressed pellets, maybe the processing of it has made them more agreeable to the mushrooms. But I saw someone pop up a question about what is pasteurized straw. So in terms of expanding the mushroom spawn into another substrate, to give it the best chance of success out there, you'd want to pasteurize ideally. And that's simply bringing the substrate up to a temperature, like using hot water. And so if you put soak your straw in really, really like nearly boiling hot water for an hour or so, and then drain it well, that's pasteurizing it. It's just killing off a number of different organisms and mold spores and potential things that'll also want to colonize the straw and turn it into a green moldy mess instead of your nice white fungal mycelium growing there. So
Yeah, and folks,
that's
there is a video in the course of me doing that. So if you go to the lessons on how to grow oyster mushrooms on straw, I actually have a video demonstrating the pasteurizing process that I use in there. Now, do you pasteurize the wood pellets as well, or do you think it comes pretty much sterile already when you're doing
they're
lion's mane?
they're pretty good. They're pretty good, but you might as well use hot water to hydrate them, and they'll hydrate faster, and then you will do that extra.
Yeah.
For me, for growing the spawn that I sell, everything is sterilized. So I take it one step beyond pasteurization, which kind of knocks back some of the competition and problems, but doesn't create a completely sterile environment.
Yeah. And do you do that in an actual like pressure cooker when you're doing it, or?
Yes, I have pressure cooker for that I use for the grain spun, and then I have atmospheric steamer for the
Mm.
sawdust spun. Yeah,
Yeah.
just
But
simple
somebody
do it
going at
yourself
home.
ones.
Yeah, someone doing it at home though that wanted to try and lion's mane, you might be able to do it just with that same pasteurizing.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Rihanna, who I mentioned, grew it in buckets of compressed wood sawdust. She just poured hot water in.
Great. Yeah. And would you add like a wheat bran or a wheat fiber to that? Or do you
I
think it's
wouldn't.
okay?
I
No.
wouldn't. I wouldn't if you're the reason is that that's like a nutritional supplement, and so it's higher in nutrients and more likely to cause problems with contamination if you're not going sterile. I mean, you can
Mm.
do anything. You can try anything. Nothing is a rule.
Sure. Yeah.
These are just like rule of thumbs. And there's different um, other principles to having success. Like if I took this one block of mycelium and expanded it into 5 times as much substrate, like straw or wood chips, then I'm going to have that colonized very quickly and successfully. But if I expanded it into 30 buckets of substrate, it's just a little bit in each bucket, it will take a lot longer to colonize. And so that gives more chance for mold or other things to contaminate out of the air and cause a problem. So there's various techniques you can use to have greater success. And you're kind of like pushing the envelope as far as how
Yeah.
far can
So
I
you're basically
expand.
saying the more spawn you put into whatever project you're trying to grow, the faster it's going to go. Probably the less chance of contamination would go there. And that's where,
That's right.
just so folks, people might not have actually knew what I was even referencing there. So sometimes, with something like lion's mane, for example, you would put something like wheat bran in with the sawdust, which is actually an easier to digest food source for the mycelium and can kind of speed up growth a little bit. But it also creates another contamination point. So that's why Jessica was saying, if you were going to add something like the wheat bran, the advantage would be you could probably make that bag of mycelium go further and do more projects. But that's where you might want to think about pressure cooking it.
Yes.
Because of the contamination risk there, just in case folks were kind of missing what we're talking about there. There's a question about coffee grounds, and then I've got one more for you before we kind of move into other techniques.
Absolutely. What was the question about coffee grounds? I
Oh,
don't
she
see
just
it.
said, what about coffee grounds as a substrate? And I will say again,
Yeah,
Cynthia, there is a whole video series in the course on coffee grounds, and I demonstrate it step by step. But I'll let Jessica answer it for those that haven't watched that lesson yet.
awesome. Yeah, coffee grounds are fun because everyone, most households have some coffee grounds, and they are, been through hot water, so they're pretty sterile as a starting place. The most successful thing to grow on coffee grounds would be a variety of oyster mushroom. So like we have blue oysters and white oysters. I'd say those are the best success. Other than that's what's typically grown on coffee grounds. I don't know if people are growing other types of mushrooms on them.
Yeah, that's
But
all
yeah,
I ever done is oysters on them.
it's oysters.
But that's a great beginner project as well too, and a
It
good
is.
first one. You could even buy your grow kit, your block, and then just take like a couple spoons out of it and inoculate a mason jar of coffee, and then the rest of it just grow out of the thing, and then you kind of do two projects side by side, even just for starting out if you wanted. So, oh no, you just froze for
Someone
a second, but I think you're
someone
back.
asked if tea would work, and oyster mushrooms grow on a wide range of agricultural waste products. So you can try it, collect up a bunch of tea bags and try it. The, there's there's really no limits to it. And oyster mushrooms are very tolerant to growing on all sorts of things.
Have you experimented with any other substrates for oysters for indoor growing other than the sawdust and coffee and straw? Are those the main
Nope.
ones you've used?
Actually, I've done the technique of cutting the stem butt,
Oh yeah.
so the very base of the cluster of the oyster mushrooms, and rolling it in cardboard. And I've actually, and then that starts to grow and grows the mycelium on the cardboard in the roll. And I just had that sitting like in a loose bag while it stayed moist and colonized. And then the next thing I know, there's a mushroom growing off the end of the cardboard. So I don't know if that's the best substrate to use in terms of, I don't know what glues or things might be in the cardboard, but mycelium sure does like cardboard. So it's a good jump off place for starting cultures.
Yeah, awesome. Maybe one other question. I know you were going to go into kind of the garden beds and wine caps, and then talk a little bit about logs. But you know what's one thing that I don't actually have in the course that might be really valuable for people tonight is actually just knowing like what are some of the different species that and why would you choose one oyster mushroom versus another? Like what are the different species that you guys sell for kits? Yeah, if you wanted, I mean, you have a whole bunch just beside you there. I'd be interested just to know a little bit about like the taste, the speed that they grow at, why you might pick one over the other. Do you want to give us just a little like types of mushrooms 101 when it comes to growing?
For sure. So oyster mushrooms, there's actually quite a few varieties. We've got a blue oyster, a white oyster, a pink oyster, Phoenix oyster is a brand new one that we're starting to grow, and a black oyster, which is a new hybrid cultivar that is available out there. So there's there's a rainbow of oyster mushrooms you can grow. I've got a few pictures I can show on that as well. The king oyster that I was showing growing in the top of the bag, this one is actually a different species of it's a pleurotus, don't know how to say it, orangi, king trumpets. And so they're a little bit of a different one, and they're a bit harder to grow. What I did with this one is I told you about cutting into the bag. Well, there's also a thing called top fruiting, and I love top fruiting. So with king oysters, I opened the bag. The bag was tall and sealed at the top, and I let them start to form mushrooms at the top here. And then once they were well established, then I cut the bag off. And you can see I left a skirt to sort of protect them and be humid. And that's called top fruiting. And that's a great technique for some of the ones that are a bit harder to get going, like the chestnut mushrooms, and reishi is a very hard one to grow because it's so slow growing. So this one actually had the bag sealed around it, and I let it grow up inside the bag, and you get these long, beautiful fingers.
Mm.
So the reishi mushroom, and then I'm opening it up to see if I can get the flattened conchs to form on the top now.
Cool.
So top fruiting just means taking letting them grow in the open top area of the bag. So
which just creates a higher humidity spot, right? That's why you're doing that.
That's right. Yeah. And so that without having to do anything, you've got a very humid environment. And once they start to form mushrooms, that high humidity is still important, but it's not as important, and airflow becomes important. So that's why at some point you have to cut the top of the bag off. So I've got a couple of pictures that I can share.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you find in the oysters, yep, it's coming on. There's just a little bit of a delay. Do you find there's a big difference in the taste from one oyster species to the next?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference in the taste and also the texture. Oyster mushrooms, I find the base of the mushroom is chewier, like that stem butt we were talking about growing right off the stem butt. And I have to say I'm not like the best of chefs, so I'm not one of the connoisseurs that can really speak to that exact profile. But if you go online, you can find some really interesting things about The like wine cap and then the whole nutritional profile, but also the flavor profile is like documented scientifically. It's really neat with the different chemicals that create the so you know if you I just eat them and enjoy them.
Nice.
This one's a blue oyster that was top fruited, so you can see it's a big cluster at the top of the bag, but it's been cut open. So a huge, beautiful bouquet. And let's see if I can get to the next photo though. There's pink oysters. Like, can you believe you can grow something that's as showy and beautiful as that?
And isn't pink a bit more of a, like, naturally it's more of a warm climate
It
mushroom?
is, yes. It's a warm climate. So the blue oyster is very cold tolerant. I've had that growing in very cold weather. In fact, I've had it freeze and then continue to grow. Pink oysters, no, because it's originally from a tropical environment, somewhere where it's warm, and it does. So it's a good mushroom to grow in the summertime, in the heat of the summer. Often, certain mushrooms like the king oyster I was showing you likes cooler weather to fruit, whereas the pink oysters are going to do really great in the summertime. And there's a chestnut mushroom that I'm holding. So some of these mushrooms you're not going to see in the grocery store. You might see them at your local farmer's market, but you can grow them yourself. And so that's pretty wild. So this one's chestnut mushroom. And there's chestnuts roasting on an open fire.
Nice. Beautiful.
And this is the newest one, Phoenix. It doesn't show the newest one that we've added to our selection. It's got a really dark gray cap, so it's not really showing that very well, but you can see how big and beefy the mushrooms are growing from it. And Pio Pino, look at that, isn't that beautiful?
Ooh, cool. I've never had those ones or tried to grow them.
Yeah. So this one I top fruited. You can see the bag. You can see down at the bottom here, there's little mushrooms that are kind of squished inside the bag, and I cut it off with a collar. But they were well established inside the bag before I cut the top of the bag off. I think that's but isn't those gorgeous?
They sure are.
Yeah, that's the last of the kits there that I wanted to share.
Yeah, beautiful.
But yeah, there's a huge diversity, lots of fun to be had.
Yeah. Maybe one thing I'll just highlight for folks, for folks that are actually thinking about wanting to have like kind of a year-round food supply from mushrooms, that's also where learning the different species is really helpful, because then you can kind of target where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to grow like my elm oysters or my white oysters or my blue oysters in the springtime. And then I'm going to do the pinks or the yellows in the summertime, and then I switch back to my blues in the fall time, even with my shiitake logs, I know you sell, and this is actually probably a nice segue to get into logs next. But I know you sell both cold and warm strain shiitake that are kind of adapted to different temperatures. So I think for years I always bought the cold strain ones, and they are actually one of the first thing that fruits. Usually my asparagus starts coming, and then my shiitake start every spring. So I would anticipate my shiitake logs are going to start popping in the next few weeks. And then the last few years, I've been starting to buy your warm strain variety, and it's great because now I get a really early flush with my asparagus, and then I get a second flush a little bit later in the season when the other things are starting to come up in the garden. So it actually kind of, by having the different strains of shiitake even, you're extending your yield throughout the year and when your harvest windows are.
Yeah, I love that about mushrooms. They are so cold tolerant, and I just want to, Vancouver Island is very mild, and so these are not a good specimens of it, but these are shiitake growing on my log right now. I didn't do anything to stimulate them to fruit. It just was raining a lot, and since we talked last, Chris, I've had mushrooms growing on shiitake mushrooms growing on my logs the whole time, just because it's been so rainy and such a mild winter for us. But yeah, I've had shiitake start in the wintertime, the cold strain, have snow sitting on the little mushrooms, and then it'll melt and then they'll grow some more. That's not the very best condition of a mushroom, but it just does illustrate how cold tolerant and how early a crop you can get from the shiitake mushrooms. So yeah, growing on logs is a fun project if you have some space, and it's a great way to make good use out of trees that are being cut down, or trees that have been knocked over, healthy trees that have been knocked over in a storm. Most of the species grow on hardwood logs, So we're talking like here on Vancouver Island, I've got red alder and big leaf maple. We've got huge big leaves for our maples. And then there's oaks and sugar maples and birch trees across Canada, you know, beech. So there's lots of different hardwood varieties that you can grow shiitake and other mushroom species on. But I'm also really interested in what can we grow on conifer trees because there's a lot of conifer trees in Canada. And so that's not as easy. One of the ones that I'm really excited about is very similar to the lion's mane. It's the lion's mane is Hericium erinaceus, and the one that we have on Vancouver Island that grows on conifers is Hericium abiates that grows on Abies trees, but it grows on a whole bunch of different conifers. So I'm trying to clone that one so that I can bring like a Canadian species that is well adapted to our environments and grows on conifer trees. But yeah, if you got trees that need to come down, like I had some alder trees that were leaning towards my house and I was concerned about them. So I took them down this winter and now I'm just about to plant them with the mushroom mycelium. And there's some like really easy ways to plant logs. I can just show you a few reach over. All you need to do is have a freshly cut tree and cut into segments that are manageable to move around. And then an easy way is using mushroom plug spawn. And they're just little wooden dowels. And they have fungal mycelium growing on them. I don't know if that's focused or not. So,
yeah, you can see it kind of, yeah.
It has white threads of fungal mycelium growing on it and in it. And so I just have to drill some holes into my log, tap this in, cover it with melted wax, and then let the log sit in a shady location. Ideally to soak them once or twice a year because it can be really dry and you want to keep them humid. And then we've got some like tools that make it easy. You can use a regular drill bit, but we've got like a special drill bit that if you're doing a whole bunch of logs, there's a special drill bit and then there's a special adapter that goes on an angle grinder. It's hilarious how fast you can drill with this. And so if you want to do this in a farming way and have hundreds or thousands of logs, then you're going to want to use a special tool. We have this like actually custom made by a machinist on Vancouver Island.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. So it's this end is hollow and you punch it into your sawdust spun and it makes a little pellet similar to that dowel. And then you put it on the drilled hole on your log and you hold it there and you go press and it pushes it into the hole. And so you can use a bag of this sawdust spawn instead, and it goes a lot further and faster than using plug spawn. But those are your two options. You just gotta buy some mushroom spawn and plant it into your log and let your log sit there and basically let nature do her thing.
Yeah, and that's what I usually do. I usually buy Jessica's shiitake bags, and then I basically have one of those pluggers that she said. And I do. I used to hand drill them.
So you use a sawdust spawn?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, one of those plugs. And I used to hand drill them, and I bought one of her little adapters for the angle grinder, and I love it. It's so fast.
Isn't it?
Oh, it is. Yeah.
It's boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's what I usually tell folks when they're just starting out, I'm like, if you're doing it for the first time and you're only going to do a handful of logs, then just buy the plugs your first time because you don't need any special tools. It's very easy. You literally just need a hammer and a drill, and then the wax to go on there. If you want to do, a dozen logs, 20 logs, and you want to maybe do that every year and start cycling them, then it's probably worth it because the plug spawn is quite a bit more expensive. If you're only going to do a few things, though, it's cheaper because you don't need to buy the additional tools. If you're going to do this every year and you're going to do like a dozen logs, 20 logs a year, then it's absolutely worth it to buy the tools and then get the bigger sawdust spawn. So that's usually what I recommend to folks. And again, just a reminder, there's, videos breaking these all down step by step inside the course. There's a couple questions in there. I got one for you first, and then maybe why don't we stop and take a couple from the chat. What's your thoughts on resting logs after you cut them? I've heard various different opinions. I've always rested my logs a couple of weeks, although I've met people that don't do that. What's your take on that?
I don't know if there's, I'm not aware of there being scientific studies on it.
Hmm.
There might be, but I'm not
I've
aware
gone
of
looking
them.
and I sure haven't found them.
Yeah,
I've been trying to
yeah.
find
So it's
them.
kind of like word on the street. So um, I would say that um, I don't generally have the time to inoculate instantly anyways when I've gone and harvested a tree. But yeah, I would say that resting 2 weeks does. What I have had is like sometimes I'll cut like a maple and then it'll try to sprout, even though it's just like a cut section
Hmm.
of a log. So it is still alive and active even, you know, even once you've cut it. So I think it makes sense to leave it for a couple of weeks. But I would not leave it for a long time.
No.
Like that's definitely not what you want to do. I think you're better off inoculating right away than leaving it for a couple of months. And that's because there's wild mushroom spores in the air at all times. They're going to land on your log and they're going to start to grow in it before you get your mushroom species planted.
Yeah. I'll let you know because we're about to do a bunch of oysters in Poplar next week, and we're going to basically cut the logs and then inoculate them the next day. And it's because it's with a school group, and they want to cut their logs themselves with the kids, and then inoculate them. And my
Perfect.
suspicion is it's probably going to be fine. My
I
guess
think
is
it'll
it's
be
just going to
fine.
kind of slow things down, at first. But my guess is it's going to work. I've never done it before. I've always rested, but I said, let's go for it. I suspect it's going to work fine. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so someone had a question about I think a stump that was already from a dead tree, and you do not want to use an unhealthy or dead stump because it's even though you can't see it, it's already colonized on the inside by other fungi. So it's not as ideal. You want a freshly fallen or cut tree, and there's trees coming down all over the place for all sorts of reasons, for development or whatnot, right? Like you contact your local arborist, they might be cutting down some trees that are dangerous because they're leaning over a house or something, and access wood that way.
Yeah. So here we
I've
go.
got
Oh, did you
I've
have?
got a picture of some of the logs. I can
Oh, great.
share. This is the end of a log after probably a year of growth. Um, and it's hard to know that anything's happening because it's happening inside the log, so you can't see anything at all. But on my logs, sometimes I see evidence that you see the white patches on the end of this log. That's the shiitake mycelium showing itself. And if I trace it down the log, I'll see where I've got an inoculation point down there. So sometimes you'll see the mycelium. Sometimes you just see modeling of just a modeling of different shades and colors at the end of the log. And that's all you're going to see. And it's a long waiting game on logs, but it's well worthwhile. I've got logs that are 8 years old and still producing. So it took a year and a half before the first flush of shiitake, but I've still got them 8 years later producing. And you can also stimulate them to fruit. I think that's an important aspect for particularly for shiitake. If you've got logs and you've been waiting a year, don't give up. If you've been waiting 2 years, don't give up because the larger the log, the longer it takes to give your first flush in general. Also, just the environmental conditions might not have been good that year for you. So if you want to help nature along, I would suggest soaking your log. So this is a good time of year to soak your log. So just put it in like a kiddie pool or a rain barrel or a creek that you have next door or whatever you've got, and soak it. It's better than sprinkling it with a sprinkler, but if that's all you've got, then sprinkle it a long time with a sprinkler. But it takes a lot for the water to soak into a log. So you literally can submerge the log. It doesn't kill the mycelium. You can submerge it for 24 hours, even 2 days. I've had them floating around my pond. And then once you've got the log hydrated, you want to keep the environment around it humid as well. So you don't want the surface to be drying out for that period of time after soaking. And one of the things that I learned to do is put a tarp over top of my stack
Mm.
of logs. And then I would water underneath, and all that water would soak into the bark layer and be on the tarp and just keep that humidity in there. As soon as I saw mushrooms starting to form, like just little tiny brown fingers coming out, then I would take that tarp off and continue to just sprinkle a little bit. So that's one of my, that'd be my tips for getting your logs to fruit. And if they don't fruit, then let them sit for a few more months and you can try again, or 6 months or 2 months, whatever
Yeah.
you have patience for.
Yeah. I'd leave a shiitake 3 years before I threw it out though. So, I mean,
Yeah.
usually I get them, at a year and a half, I'd say on average. But if I didn't get it the second year, I wouldn't toss it. I would give it a third. And I've had them, just you said that second year is just a wonky year or whatever, right? And it was a bit of a bigger log. So
Yeah. Yeah. Don't give up. I mean, that's about when they're going to fruit, is when you're ready to give up. they're, they're challenging that way, so that you can get like just beautiful mushrooms, but it is a bit more challenging outside to maintain the quality. So if you're like selling for if you're eating them yourself, it's not such a big deal. If you're selling them at a farmer's market, you want to have good, like not like the ones that are on my log right now, it's like they've just kind of been at the whims of crazy weather. So I would, even if it was too rainy at the key time, then I would actually stop the rain from falling on the mushrooms that were forming, because it was just too much rain. Similarly, you don't want them to dry out. And but look at, isn't that just beautiful mushrooms? Those are shiitake.
I love shiitake. They're one of my favorite foods in the whole world.
Yeah. So here's a whole stack, a typical way to stack them, crib stack. I could also mention pests and problems. If you look at the very bottom right corner, you'll see that the log is sitting up on a cinder block, and that there's some mesh wire there. It's like what is it called? I can't remember the
Oh,
name
like
of
the
that cloth.
hardware cloth, I think. Is that
Yeah,
yeah.
it's fine squares of, and what I did was I cut the outer edge so that they're pokey.
Oh,
So
smart.
that it's really pokey, because slugs are a terrible bane for mushroom growing for me here on Vancouver Island. So I've got the logs raised off the ground, and then to get by, they have to get by that pokey.
Oh, that's really
You have
smart,
to climb
Jessica.
over that. Yeah, so you got to be creative in trying to deal with some of the problems that you'll run into. I've had woodpeckers experimenting with my logs to see if there's any insects in there, and I've had chickens come and peck all the wax off. Chickens on the property. So yeah, but beautiful, beautiful crops of shiitake. This is actually wild turkey tail mushrooms, which are something you can harvest from the wild, but you can also grow them. And talk about mycelium and different qualities. These guys, this mycelium colonizes so quickly, it makes me laugh. You just put it in a bag of grain spun and you blink, and it's like days later the whole bag is colonized. So it's a very, very aggressive colonizer, turkey tail is. And so this is I harvest it for its medicinal properties of helping boost my immune system. And this one was back in the hillside, up the hillside here in the forest, and I toned it. So I'm really excited to be growing it in a bag of sawdust with wheat bran.
So you actually
Um,
cloned this right from the forest.
I did,
Oh,
yeah.
very cool. And
Yeah.
is that by
Yeah.
like cutting a piece out of it and then putting it in a petri dish with some agar or?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Cut just a little piece and put it in a petri dish with agar, and I managed to get some that wasn't contaminated, and then we've expanded it. So yeah, this is one of the first wild Canadian clone species that we're going to be offering.
Oh, that's so exciting.
This is my trial, and yeah, isn't it beautiful? Just amazing. So I just growing from slits that I cut in the
Here,
bag.
can you stop the slide for a second just so we can see the actual
Oh,
bag?
yeah.
Nice to get a bigger picture there.
Forgot about that part. So is that working?
Yeah, that's cool. Look at that. Oh yeah, and look at how you've got the slits all like layered all the way around it, eh? Just kind of like it grows on a log.
Yeah, and then the underside is the white porous
Yeah,
underside. Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah, so I'm trying to clone, like I said, the species that grows on conifer trees and also oyster mushrooms. So we have like wild Canadian species
Yeah.
to
So you'll hopefully
share
be
with them.
selling those kits down the road then?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the turkey tail we're just about to. I also have chicken of the woods that I cloned.
Oh, fun.
Super cool mushroom. But it's not easy to grow.
Mm.
So, Field and Forest Products in the US has got some great videos on experiments that they've done on like um, cooking or pressure cooking the log first and then inoculating hunks of it. And then once it's colonized, burying it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's pretty cool to have a clone of chicken of the woods. And it's an orange mycelium, which is different.
Yeah,
It's
very
not,
cool.
yeah, I think I had one more slide
Okay,
there.
great. And then yeah, we have a
Okay.
couple log questions in the comments
Okay,
I'd love to
perfect.
ask you once you
There,
show us
I
this
just
next
wanted to
slide.
show that. That's a lion's mane growing out of a log. So I haven't done lots of lion's mane growing because I don't have like some of the preferred tree species that lion's mane would like, but this is on an alder log. So it is possible, but I haven't had lots of success with the lion's mane on the alder. But isn't that cool? A little
It
like
is.
looks otherworldly.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. I love lion's mane. That's, I said shiitakes. It'd be a hard toss up for me between shiitake and lion's mane. I love them both. The texture of lion's mane is just so good when you're like you fry it up with some butter and like, oh my goodness. Or like even in a soup, a stir fry. I just love the texture of it. So okay, so someone's asking here, some of the logs we inoculated last year have some sort of tramates in it, so turkey tail growing on them. Should I discard the log or do the mushrooms we're aiming to grow still have a chance to fruit? What's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that's a turkey tail. Like I said, it's one of the most aggressive colonizers. So it is one of the common things that I will have growing unintentionally on my logs too. I've had other things like hypoxylon, this black crusty thing, or some other um, pink frilly sort of like a polypore, kind of like a turkey tail, but it really seemed to be just on the surface for that one. So yeah, sometimes those logs didn't work at all, and sometimes like you will find in nature that more than one species is growing on a dead log. Like you will find different species colonizing the same log, just taking a hold of different sections. So I wouldn't give up on your logs. I wouldn't give up on them at all. But at worst, it sounds like you might have turkey tail.
Yeah. I mean, my experience has been most of the time when I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but I get the odd shiitake log that ends up with turkey tail growing out of it. And usually I find that those end up becoming turkey tail logs in my experience. I don't know that
Yeah,
I've ever actually had one of them then go and shoot a shiitake after it. And I think it's because the turkey tail mycelium just grows so much faster than the shiitake. But
it
usually
does.
what I find is it's not usually like so, let's say I do a dozen logs, the turkey tail doesn't usually get into all of them. It's like, oh, one log got infected by the turkey tail or two logs, but then all the other ones are still good. That's kind of what my experience has been, anyways. And then, like you said, the turkey tail is a very potent medicinal mushroom. If you're not familiar with turkey tail and its uses, we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks. My wife Laura is going to be coming on, and we're going to be doing a session, a deep dive onto the medicinal properties of the polypores. Now, I don't know if turkey tail really counts as a polypore, but we'll probably chat about it
Yeah.
anyways because it's a shelf fungus. So, yeah. Okay, so that was the one question. The other one here was I've just read that yellow oysters are starting to become invasive or can be invasive.
Yeah, there's a lot of concern about that in the US, and it's getting a lot of press lately. It has been found naturalized in the US, and there's my understanding is there's a study that is showing it potentially having displaced some the wild species in the area. I think it's uh, also being my understanding is there's been sightings in Ontario, maybe as far as up to where you are, Chris.
Okay.
Um, have you ever seen it?
I've never seen it in the wild, but I started growing yellow, dabbling with them when I first started growing, and I've actually stopped now because of concern about it
Mhm.
spreading into the natural environment around here because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
started here, so I don't grow them anymore.
it's something that I've been struggling with, and I actually was just talking to my sister about that today. It's like I think we'll probably end up stopping to sell this because because of the concern. But I have to say, I'm actually quite surprised that it is a concern because unlike other oyster, like the wild oyster mushrooms, the wild turkey tail, like those things colonize the logs so quickly and aggressively. I just have a hard time, in my experience, with yellow oyster mycelium. It's not as strong and aggressive. So
Mm.
I'm quite surprised that this is becoming a possible problem in invasive species. And yeah, so it's one to follow for sure, and one to be mindful of. And if you are growing like a kit indoors, that I think is a less risk to the problem than perhaps growing it on logs.
Yeah, that
So
makes sense.
I think
Yep.
we've made a decision to stop just out of precaution to after the season we'll probably stop selling them as plug spawn and stuff.
Somebody's saying, what about city tap water? If you're using it for soaking your logs or even misting mushrooms. So if people are using urban water that's chlorinated, what's your thoughts on that?
Chlorinated water, well, chlorine is toxic, and but it does evaporate. So if you have your water just sitting open on your counter, the chlorine will evaporate. Or similarly, if you fill up a soaking bin. So it's not something I can speak to with much experience personally because I tend to be in rural areas on wells. So I don't have a chlorinated system. But if you fill up your soaking tank and let it sit open, then I'm not sure what's happening. It says iPhone 6 right now. I don't know what you're seeing on your thing. Um, is there a problem on the screen, Chris?
I just muted them. Yeah, you
Oh,
should be. I think
okay.
you should be pinned for everybody. So
Oh, okay, 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 all good. Um, so yeah, I think if you just fill up your misting container or your soaking bin and let it sit overnight, that you'll be fine. But I would have to hear on other people if they're like, ah, whatever, we just use chlorinated water all the time. It doesn't matter.
mhm. If you're doing this in an urban setting, something you could think about is getting like a kiddie pool. Would be perfect for soaking logs in, and then you could fill it up with the
Yeah,
chlorinated water, but just let it sit overnight, and then you soak your logs the next day, right? So,
yeah,
and I just saw from Mel and Joe there, it's not actually the turkey tail; it's a different type of Traumates or Termites that they had.
yeah.
So, oh, that's too bad. I was hoping at least he had turkey tail.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
disappointing when that
mhm.
happens, but don't give up yet. It's too soon.
Yeah, Tara says, how concerned should we be about other types of mushrooms on logs being invasive? And my
Yeah.
experience, I mean, none of the common ones we grow, I have any worry about spreading. Like the shiitake, the lion's mane, the normal oysters. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that question was if that was the angle or if it was about consuming mushrooms that were from a wild species invading the log. Um, so yeah,
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I'm not to deal with the first aspect of that. I'm not aware of other species being known to um, to naturalize and become invasive. But I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I just it's not. I know that it's happened with the uh, uh, here on Vancouver Island. We have a deadly mushroom that's in the wild now. That wasn't originally here, and that came in the roots of plants that were sold in nurseries, trees. Um, so that was the one of the amanitas. So from the other perspective, yeah, other things can invade your logs. You're giving it a huge advantage because you're planting like the more plugs or bits of sawdust you put into that log, the more your species has the opportunity to take over quickly compared to something out in the wild. But it is possible that you didn't know it and you cut down a tree that was kind of infected with something already, or some wild spores did land on it and grow. So you do need to um, identify your mushrooms, even if you've planted them, just to be sure. But you definitely have a good starting place because you know what to expect, and then you can look up how to identify them just to feel more confident.
Yeah, great. We're getting up close to the end of the hour here, and I would like to talk about wine caps and beds still really quickly. So let's make sure we do that. There's one other. Let's touch on these two other ones really quickly, and then why don't we
Okay.
kind of wrap up with the wine cap piece, and then if there's any questions around
Okay.
that, we can finish it up.
Okay.
So someone's just asking about nutritional value between wild forage mushrooms and homegrown mushrooms. I mean, I've got some thoughts on that. I don't know if you want to comment or.
That's a good one. I know that you would want to be one mindful of substrates because
Mhm.
mushrooms are used for bioremediation, for pulling chemicals out of the ground and things. So like you don't want to eat mushrooms from like the Chernobyl after effect area because they're radioactive. So you want to be mindful of where you harvest and the and also what you're growing on if you're growing. So I'll throw that part out in terms of sourcing your meat growing mediums and sourcing your wild mushrooms from clean areas. And I'll throw it over to you for any other comments you have.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I know. So, for example, shiitake mushrooms have a very strong nutritional profile that have been, there's all kinds of lab tests that you can get access to. And the majority of shiitake logs are mushrooms people are eating are growing ones, right? And I think part of that, though, is usually when you're growing shiitakes, you're growing it on a wood fiber. So they're still getting, and it kind of comes down to what Jessica was just saying, what is the substrate that they're growing on? And I can't prove this one. I don't have the lab to do it, but I would imagine that like a wild harvested oyster off of a maple or a poplar tree might have a slightly stronger nutritional profile than oyster growing on straw. Because you're thinking about, it's like the same with like modern agriculture. They talk about how a lot of modern vegetables aren't as nutritious as they were 100 years ago when we were, growing these vegetables out of really healthy soil. So there's a direct relationship between soil and the nutrients in the veggies. So the same would go with mushrooms. But if you're growing mushrooms on logs, that's the same thing that they're growing on in the forest. So I think when you're growing on logs, you're going to have a very similar profile in those wild grown mushrooms as you are in the cultivated ones.
That's
And
a really
even when
good
you're growing
question.
on like wood chips and stuff like that, same kind of thing. You're growing on wood chips, so you're getting all of those like the beta glucans and all those different nutrients that are like actually in the trees themselves are still there when you're growing them yourselves because of the substrate you're growing on. So probably the thing is just make sure you're growing on good substrate, and you're probably going to have very nutritional mushrooms coming off of it. Would be my thought on that.
Yeah, that would be a great research project for a university student.
Cool. Why don't we actually? The other question is actually around growing morels, but I wonder if we don't actually go into the wine cap beds first and then come
Let's
back
do
to
the
that one.
wine cap for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. Morels are exciting. So wine caps. Well, let's take a look at what they look like. Am I sharing my screen?
Not yet.
No, I'm not sharing my screen. Okay, there we go. So wine caps are, I'm so excited that I can share access to wine cap spawn with people because they are so easy to grow. They are such a good companion in your garden and they produce in massive abundance. So I think I mentioned that there was a hydro crew that cut down some trees in order to expand the hydro line and dumped me off some wood chips. Well, this is the wood chips here at the base of my raspberry plants. So I mulched around my raspberries with a thick layer of wood chips, and then I crumbled up the spawn of the wine cap mycelium and spread it in the wood chips. And it just loves growing on wood chips. So it doesn't take long. It's not like growing on logs where you have to wait a year or so. We're talking about months to get your first harvest from a wine cap bed. But you can keep it going year after year by just feeding it more wood chips. You can also grow it similarly on straw. And please experiment and let us know what else you've added in to make it grow because I know it's loving the manure, the horse manure that I've spread around the garden too. I can see the white fungal threads growing through the horse manure and well composted horse manure. So the so I'm not saying that those are the exhaustive only things you can grow on them, but they're pretty accessible things for us. So hardwood sawdust, wood chips, or straw, and you can grow them at the base of your perennials. You can grow them amongst your annual rows of beans or whatever you're growing in your garden. You could plant them under your fruit trees, or you could just make a container planter of them in a shady area. Um, I know mushrooms don't like to be dried out in the garden, so or in a sunny area generally. generally the advantage of growing mushrooms is you could take advantage of a shady area and grow mushrooms where you can't grow other food. But in the case of wine caps and growing them in the garden, they it's where you're watering anyways because you're watering your garden plants, and so that keeps the substrate moist. And then the little microenvironments around with the leaves and things will also create an environment where they can pop up when the conditions are right. Of course, it's got to rain or you got to water them lots, but it's super easy to grow. Here is what it looks like. This is a handful of wood chips, and a little bit of the brown area is probably some of the compost that I had around, and all that white. I can zoom in. You see that?
Oh yeah.
All that white are the fungal threads of the wine cap. So it's so cool to see. It's really easy to see it. Unlike, is the shiitake growing in my log? I don't know. The wine cap, you just dig down and you can see it. So it's really rewarding in that way as well. And that's what gives rise to those big, huge mushrooms. So there they are popping up in my raspberries. They're so cute. But they can be smaller, but they can also get just massive. And there they are growing with my thyme. My thyme's flowering, and I literally have them fruiting from May until October in my climate. And then at the end of October or whenever I feel like it, add some more wood chips or sawdust or straw to the bed, and then that mulches it, gives it a blanket for the winter and some food early next spring, and they'll start growing again. So there you can see how big they can get. Just massive, and they're super easy to identify. They've got the burgundy top, they've got these dark purpley black gills, and they've got a special ring on their stalk of tissue that is really distinctive, and it's not as great in these photos to show you, but you can see the spores on the stem from them. So yeah, really easy to identify them as well. And there they are harvested at a button stage before they've opened up into massive caps. So that's kind of like eating them at their prime. And here you can see some examples of that really special tissue that's left a ring on the stalk after it breaks away, exposing the gills. So that's my wine cap excitement moment.
I love the look of those little wine caps. Like before the caps open up, there's something about them that I just love. And I love cooking those ones too, like cutting them up and putting them in like a pasta or like.
Yes, and the bigger ones I made into soup broth. It's like a really dark colored soup broth, and just froze that as well so that I could have it as a starter for the winter time.
One thing
So
that I
yeah,
always, oh, sorry, go for it.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say one thing I always point out to people, some people do find their bellies a little bit sensitive to wine caps. And they're an interesting one. So I eat shiitakes probably like 3-4 times a week. When my logs are going off, I probably eat them almost every day. Wine caps, I can really only eat them like kind of 1 or 2 meals. And then I actually have to take a break for a little bit. When we first started growing wine caps, like we made a big dish of wine caps and I started eating them every day and my stomach started actually feeling upset. Now it doesn't seem to last long term. It's like if I just eat a meal of wine caps and then wait a few days and then eat another one, I'm fine. But if I eat them a few days in a row, it doesn't feel great in my belly. And I've heard of other people like this with wine caps now as well.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this before?
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that Paul Stamets talks about that, about not eating wine caps too many days in a row. But that said, every mushroom species is a different mushroom species, and you could have your own like intolerance or sensitivity to it, or an allergic reaction too.
Sure, yeah.
So if it's your first time eating a shiitake, eat just a little bit. It's hard to do, but that's your best bet for the first time too, right? Yeah. Introduce foods, just like when you're wild foraging.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so people wanted to know about growing morels, right? So do I. I do have, I was just looking for my jar of morels. Where are they? I do have some morel cultures. Like there is one, oh, here they are, right here, the closest, easiest access spot. So These ones are fire morels. So I was gifted these and I gave a tour. And I got to get myself out to harvest some fire
Mm.
morels. But growing morels is still an adventure and an experiment. It is being done, and but it's not being done with absolute reliability and replication. Um, but the species that you want to try with is the landscape morel, which does grow and decompose wood chips. So sometimes I have had people come over to me, are these morels? You know, just wanting confirmation of they were growing in the wood chips. I got all this landscaping wood chips dropped off and mulched in my garden, and then I had all these morels. I'm like, ooh, that's wonderful. So there is the species in morel that are easier to grow than others, just because of the ecology.
Hmm. And we have a few wine cap. Do you got a couple minutes just for some wine cap questions before we break?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So first off, actually, this one isn't wine caps. We'll go back to Jackie here. In your experience, do you know any mushroom species that are particularly would support bee colonies or
Mm.
vice versa? I don't know anything about that myself. Do you?
Well, look at Paul Stamets. I'm sure you'll find something on YouTube around that. And I'm pretty sure it was the wine cap mycelium that he found the bees going to.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, there
I
is
haven't
something
heard that.
going
Oh, I
on
want to
there.
research that then. Huh.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm going
yeah,
to make a note of that. Bees, Paul Stamets. I'm just making a note. There's a research project for me after tonight. Okay. How thick is your wood chip bed for the wine caps? How thick?
Oh, like that big, that thick, maybe to that thick.
Yeah, so kind of 3, 4 inches, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I did an experiment where I made a huge mound. And I tried putting like little branches in it too. I wanted to see what would happen. And I ended up not, I got some production out of this, but I think I was more doing a compost heap that way, that it
Mm.
was other processes were happening that didn't favor the growth of so in my experience, big, huge mounds aren't as good. But I know that like Paul Stamets grows them in myco totes, which are quite large fish totes, so they do have a lot of depth. So I'm not saying that my experience is like the end of the knowledge on that by any means. It's just that I tried making a really big mound and it just didn't work out. So just a nice thick layer. And the benefit to your garden is that you're also that mulch is keeping the moisture in for your plants.
Mm.
And then over time the mycelium is breaking down the wood chips and adding nutrients to your soil. So if I pull up an area where I've mulched it with the wine cap bed, it's full of worms underneath there. It's really happy and vibrant soil. So it's a win-win for your garden, as well as you're making a lot more food out of the exact same space. So it's perfect if you're a market gardener or a backyard gardener.
Hmm.
It's just a wonderful.
Yeah, I really think the wine caps have done wonders for actually building our soil, and I haven't tracked it scientifically, but my just observational evidence is that we're getting bigger yields on the beds where we've got wine caps growing there. It seems like it brings the soil to life, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, what are the best wood chips to use for wine caps? So, what types of wood chips are we looking at? Deciduous? Will they grow in coniferous? And any suggestions of where to get them or source them? Or anything else we
Um,
need to know about wood chips?
the resources say up to 50% conifer can be added to it. But generally hardwood is your best bet. I find that those large hunks of chips do really well and last longer. Wine cat really love that. So straw is gonna possibly give you a faster yield, but breaks down a lot quicker. So if you can mix it together, all the better. So you can use the fuel pellets that expand into sawdust, or you can it can be a bit harder to get sawdust or chips. I mean hardwood chips, but you can get like bedding for like rabbit bedding and
Mm.
things like that. So big mounds of it, or contact your local arborist and or follow the hydro crew around and say, hey, can I have a load of those chips? But I have done an experiment where I got some sawdust that was just from a clear cut next door. I just scooped some sawdust from Douglas fir trees and mixed it half and half. So
Oh,
I did
cool.
one pure alder, one half and half, and one pure conifer, and it did not take in the conifer only one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's cool. That's why the experimenting is so fun too, right? Trying those
Yeah.
things. Yeah. Yeah, great there. So Mel and Joel, we have leftover spawn mycelium in a bag from this time last year where we kept it in the fridge. Doesn't seem dried out. Do you think it's still viable? I mean,
It could be.
I would say try it. Probably what's going to happen is like the vitality is probably not the same, so it's probably going to grow slower. And if it grows slower, there's more susceptibility to mold. So it kind of depends. You know, if everything is kind of perfect, it may still work. But it is going to be more susceptible depending on those other variables. So that would be my
And then
thought on that.
it's like if you want to get a fat, if you're putting it into logs, it's kind of like a big investment. You know, if you cut a tree and you want to know you're going to have success. But if you are just growing it into buckets and you can get a fast result out of it, then you could give it a try. But if you take a little piece of it and wrap it in moist cardboard and keep it moist at room temperature, and maybe just put it inside of an open baggie, it should fuzz up and become more white and fuzzy. And then you'll know that it's still alive before you go and invest any more effort into it.
Cool. Just a couple more here. What do we have there? Left to respond. Uh, any thoughts with slugs and wine caps? I haven't had a big issue there. Do you got any tricks for that one?
Oh, slugs. They just decimated my garden, like everything, my asparagus and my zucchini plants. So the best bet is harvest early, like at that early stage. Then
Hmm.
you're going to have minimal opportunity for things to get to your mushrooms.
And they're
Um,
so prolific and so fast growing. Like, you know, if you get out there
yeah,
first thing in the morning, you know, it's like every day you've got a new flush coming out.
it's
So,
true. Yeah. Yeah, they come up quickly. So harvest them is to be on top of harvesting them is it's really the best you can do. You could if you have a certain area and you wanted to do something creative, like put a slug barrier on it, like a mesh cloth or a um some what do you call those shears that you used to have in the windows? um, Something that would be a physical barrier to the slugs, but would still allow the mushrooms to pop up,
mhm.
and that might help.
Cool. I'll answer a couple of these really quick just because I want to get through all of these. So yes, Pamela, pellet sawdust can work. Jill's wine caps need to be pasteurized. No, you don't normally need to pasteurize with wine caps because they're just such an aggressive growing mycelium. And then also sun versus shade. I mean, wine caps are a little more hardy than a lot of the other species. So I find they will sometimes even pop up in sunnier spots. But ideally, you know, if they're growing, for example, like we grow them underneath our squash plants. So like the plant in your garden create the shade and then the mushrooms tend to grow kind of underneath them and in those shady spots. You know, Jessica mentioned growing them underneath her raspberries. So again, you get that kind of a little bit of shade from the raspberries above it. But I have had them pop up in full sun before as well. So generally, you know, try and design them into shadier spots, but they can handle a little more sun than most of the other species in my experience.
If they do pop up in the sun, that'll also change the way they look. So just be aware of that, where I was saying kind of identifying them and having the burgundy cap. When they're exposed to environments like dry air or sunshine, they can go gold, a little bit of a golden brown color, and I've even had them kind of white.
Mhm.
So that might be a bit confusing to you.
Yeah. Tara, yes, you should be able to grow them in zone 3. I don't see problems with them overwintering there. Um, and then we'll do this. I noticed yeah, we'll take this maybe as the last two questions here. So I noticed there's a lot of plastic use in the process, spore bags, soaking bins, humidity tents, etc. Has there been any studies on microplastics in mushrooms grown in this way? And are there non-plastic alternatives? I've got a couple thoughts on that one too, but do you want to share there first?
I don't know of any studies, but it's a really good point. It's not it's challenging to the spawn bag itself has a special filter patch on it. And this has really changed the game in terms of people being able to produce spawn and grow mushrooms themselves. Without this, it will be a lot harder because you need to be sterile, and that filter patch keeps mold and contamination out. So these are very specialized bags, but you can grow in alternative things. Like this is a jar that I would use for, you could grow grain spawn in the jar. You could, yeah, you can grow in glass jars. You can grow in any container you want, really. It's the production of the spawn that is really challenging, and but you can grow your own spawn using liquid culture. So you could put cooked rye grain in here, put in a pressure cooker and pressure cook it, and then inject it with a liquid mycelium growing in a sugary broth. You just inject it through the injection port, and then so there are some once it gets to you, some alternatives, like you can get one plastic syringe, and grow an infinite amount from this in whatever containers that you're choosing.
Yeah, and I was just gonna add, you could do, there are a number of ways you could grow in glass jars, but it's just a lot more work. And there's some extra steps in there. The other thing I would just say is, like, on the plastics, I don't have, again, a scientific study to back this up, and I'm very, careful around plastics and microplastics in my life. But the quality of plastic really matters. And these bags these autoclave bags that you're growing in, they're literally strong enough that you can put them into a pressure cooker and they don't melt, right? So the fact that that bag can sit under that kind of heat and not even melt tells me that that plastic is actually fairly stable, like the chemistry of it. And when you're using food grade containers, like, I would definitely not want to use older or cheaper plastics. So I do grow in 5-gallon buckets, but I get food grade buckets, and they're fresh ones. I don't want an older bucket that's starting to show signs of breaking down. But I think when they're those fresh food grade buckets, like, when you clean it out, there's no sign of the mycelium growing into the plastic, or even on the plastic for that matter, like, it's growing through the substrate when I do it. You clean it out there. So I don't have a lot of I don't have a scientific study to back it up. I don't have a lot of personal concern about using a little bit of plastic at certain stages in the growth myself. Um, would I like to avoid the plastic from an environmental perspective altogether? Yes, absolutely. But there's to do that at any kind of quantity is actually, like I've experimented with growing different things in glass jars, and it's substantially more work, and you don't get nearly the same yield. It does become kind of challenging. And if you're thinking about that, then probably looking at logs and garden beds are probably your better bet, and probably staying away from the indoor side. It's growing indoors without plastic is pretty challenging. I'll say that. Um, and can I use layered dry leaves from the forest floor? Have you ever tried leaves for wine caps?
Yeah, I would add those to a bed. I would add them on top of, to like um mulch on top of the bed and create a winter. So that, yeah, they will grow on the leaves as well. I haven't used it exclusively with leaves, but I have added leaves to the bed. And a good way to see, like, will it grow on this, is you can add it to the side of a portion of the bed and see if you see the white mycelium growing into it and liking it or not. So that would be, instead of investing in doing a whole grow in that substrate, you could try introducing it and seeing if it takes to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The one thing I'll say on that is I have a suspicion it won't work on straight leaves. And it's just based on the fact that I've never seen wine caps grow outside of a garden bed. So we planted a
Mm.
couple corners of our garden, and now the wine caps are all through our garden bed. But our garden is right on the edge of the forest, and it doesn't cross into the forest, which is where the leaf debris is. So my guess
Yeah.
is that it's probably not going to grow in the straight leaf debris. Although it'd be worthwhile to experiment, with different variables for sure. So we should probably wrap up here, Jessica. Maybe just to finish off. Well, first off, thank you so much. That was just jam
My
packed with
pleasure.
so much valuable, useful information. I suspect folks really enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it. I made a bunch of notes as we were going here. Maybe just remind us what you have going on at Grow Mushrooms Canada right now. So you've got tools there. So for the inoculation tools and the different bits
Yeah,
for drilling, you've got multiple types of spawns. You've got the plugs. Anything else that you want to kind of have there? I mean, you sell the grow bags themselves.
yeah. We're basically an online store and can ship anywhere in Canada. For people in the US that there's lots of US sources. And yeah, you can check out our resources on our website. This is the season, the peak prime season to get started in planting. You know, you can do it. You can plant your wine cask anytime between now and the fall. But if you want to have production this year, the sooner you get to it, the better.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jessica. Really appreciate having you on here tonight.
Sure.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you're inspired to actually go and make mushrooms a reality this year if you haven't yet, or if you're having a little bit of trouble. Hopefully tonight's class gave you some little tips. Remember, you can always fire me an email. And our next live class, I think, is in 2 weeks. My wife Laura is going to be coming on, and we're going to be doing a deep dive into foraging for polypore fungi or polypore mushrooms, and then also
Nice.
doing medicine making with the polypore. So that's going to be a really fun class. So good night, everyone.
And
Oh,
then you've got your Chris Outdoors coupon.
oh yeah, Chris Outdoors 10 for 10% off anything at Grow Mushrooms Canada. Remember that one. And also list that inside the course. So, all right, night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.